Hello, my name is Jan Sabaro, and today we're going to be analyzing Death Be Not Proud by John Donne. Let's get to analyzing it. Before that, though, I would like to discuss John Donne's early life, since it might be important when you analyze the poem itself. So, John Donne was born into a Catholic family in 1572, actually during a strong anti-Catholic period in England. So something important that happened when he was young was that Don's father died in 1576, and his mother remarried a wealthy man. And as you might expect, this impacted his life greatly, as he had to change his lifestyle. At age 12, he managed to enter Oxford University and later the University of Cambridge, but never received degrees due to his Catholicism. At age 20, I'm sorry, Don began studying law at Lincoln's Inn, working towards a legal or diplomatic career. However, during the 1950s, he spent much of his time of his inheritance on women, books, and travel. And this is actually where he started to concentrate more on literature and wrote most of his famous love lyrics and erotic poems. So yeah. As his life continued, however, his religion was becoming more of a problem as his brother became imprisoned because he believed in Catholicism. This had a big impact on his life again as he questioned his faith, and it inspired some of his best work. Later in his life, he also became the private secretary to Sir Thomas Egerton, the Lord Keeper of the Great Seal of England, and also around this time period, he also married the 16-year-old niece of Sir Egerton, which led to his imprisonment. And after being released, he became obsessed with death, writing many poems about it, and he ended up dying in March 31, 1631. So the origins of the poem Death Be Not Proud. So something to keep in mind is that this was part of one of John Donne's holy sonnets, which were also called the Divine Meditations or Divine Sonnets, which was a series of 19 devotional poems which address religious themes of mortality, divine judgments, love, and more. When he wrote the Holy Sonnets, his wife not only passed away, but this was also a time period where he converted to from Catholicism to Anglicanism, which influenced much of his writing. And you will also see later that this is important because actually in Death Be Not Proud, he does a lot of allusions to religion. So knowing this transformation allows us to understand more of the author's intentions when he wrote the poem. And another key point was that it was written in 1617. However, it was published in 1633, 2 years after his death. So this is the full poem, Death Be Not Proud. And just for this slide, I'm just going to read it plainly and then I'll go more into depth into it. So let's start. Death, be not proud, thou some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou thinkst thou'st overthrow, die not, poor Death, nor yet can thou kill me. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure. Then from thee much more must flow, and soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and soul's delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, and those with poison, war, and sickness dwell, and popular charms can make us sleep as well. And better than thy stroke, why soul'st thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. So, what is the summary of this poem? Basically, the main theme of this poem is to address the powerlessness of death. The speaker mocks death as it were a person with an inflated ego and expresses that there's nothing to be afraid of. The thing that truly dies at the end is death, because when somebody dies, what he says is that they're granted eternal life in heaven. So death cannot really kill a person. And from this theme, we can also see the author's what he believes in and his allusion to religion. Therefore, death is just a short sleep that can be easily overcome, meaning that there's nothing to fear. And also from the summary, we can also assume that the speaker of this poem is probably somebody who's driven by religion and believes in the afterlife, which contributes to what he is writing. Here are my annotations. We can see that right off the bat, there's an anaphora with the word death scattered all throughout the poem. Now, an author might do this for many reasons, such as to emphasize a point, but in this case, the author uses the anaphora of the word death to kind of personify death, as if it were an actual person. And it makes it seem as if the speaker is actually like talking to death. It essentially gives death a personality. And especially with the aggressive diction that he uses, such as the word mighty, dreadful, overthrow, and kill, which I highlighted. In red, we can see the supposed prideful personality that death has. Additionally, phrases such as poor and be not proud, which I highlighted in yellow, it contributes to the taunting and mocking tone that the author is trying to convey, while additionally transmitting a dark mood for the readers like us. There are also allusions, as mentioned previously before, to heaven. We can see that I highlighted it in purple, such as rest of their bones and soul's delivery, and one short sleep past, we wake eternally. It's referring to heaven, and that we go to heaven. And additionally, we have two analogies comparing that to other things to make a claim. I'm going to go more in depth later into what these devices mean and how it contributes to the summary of the poem and what the author's message is. So the structure of the poem. So the poem is a Petrarchan sonnet, which is 14 lines in total, divided into 8 lines in the first stanza and 6 lines in the second stanza. It has a formal structure, which means it follows a set pattern of rhymes and rhythms, which I'm going to show later, that builds up into forms based on specific rules. The formal structure is quite typical in sonnets, which is something to keep in mind. Then we have an iambic pentameter, which combines unstressed syllables with stressed syllables. And also the poem follows a rhyme structure in the first stanza of A, B, B, A, A, B, B, A, and the second stanza follows a rhyme structure of C, D, D, C, E, E. So now I'm going to go more in depth into each line and just analyze the poem. So in lines 1 to 2, this is the introduction, it reads, "Death, be not proud, thou some have called thee mighty and dreadful." What I paraphrased, what I thought of this with the line, how it can be made simpler, was, "Death, do not be proud just because some people have called you fearsome and terrifying." So we can see right off the bat that the speaker is trying to personify death with the anaphora of the word death itself, and it like makes it seem as arrogant. And with the description in harsh diction with the words mighty and dreadful. And the purpose of this is to introduce a part of the speaker's critical opinion on death. The audience gets a glimpse towards where this poem is headed, as he establishes death's reputation and what the people generally characterize death as. And most people will say that death is fearsome and terrifying. So he states to not be proud just because some people think of you that way. So this is just the introduction, which will lead to an argument as the poem moves on. In lines 2 to 4, it states, "For thou art not so, for those whom thou thinkst thou'st overthrow, die not, poor death, nor yet can thou kill me." And this can be paraphrased into, "Death is not fearsome nor terrifying. In fact, for those who think death can end somebody's life, it cannot. Unfortunate death cannot even end me." So from this, we can see that we can see the tone of the reader as accusative and direct, along with the words overthrow and poor, which serve to pity death. This works to reveal his claim that what most people think of death is wrong, and implies that death has an inflated ego that does not have the power to truly end somebody's life, which is the whole role of death. So he's criticizing that. Now in lines 5 to 6, it states, "From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure." And it can be translated as, "Rest and sleep, which are similar to death, are pleasurable activities." And this just simply compares rest and sleep to death by stating they're images of each other. And this is just the beginning of a claim, and it's just need to build up the claim later on in the next line. So in line 6, it states, then from thee much more must flow. And it can be translated into death from death, then from death, it will bring more pleasure. So this is just an analogy between death and sleeping, and it has the effect on the poem is that it backs up the original claim that death is powerless. But it even goes further by insisting that because resting and sleeping are pleasurable, they will be even more pleasurable since they are mere images of each other. And as I mentioned previously, this is one of the reasons why death is not as powerful as people make it out to seem. And this is what the whole poem is basically about. And we can see as we analyze further into each line that this trend of giving reasons to why death is powerless, of making the claim of the poem, persists. So in line 7, it states, and soonest our best men with thee do go. And I wrote that the best people often die first. This is just very concrete and straightforward. And it just introduces another reason why death is not that powerful, as I mentioned previously before. In lines 8, it reads, rest of their bones and soul's delivery can be paraphrased into, their dead will rest and their soul will be delivered to the afterlife. And the device used here is an allusion to heaven, as he refers to the afterlife. The words bone and souls is a big giveaway. And I think of the purpose of this, in including this, is to undermine death and persuade the religious part of the audience that death can be pleasurable. And as I mentioned also before in the biography, he mentions a lot of religion. And we can see that the time period between when he moved from Catholicism to Anglicanism is shown here, as he's more motivated to talk about it and more free to talk about it in his poems. Now, line 9. So, thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men. I translated it into fate, chance, kings, and desperate men control death. So this is actually the shift of the poem as it gets to be more hostile towards death, and the speaker has more of a taunting tone that is more apparent. Also, like beforehand, he also had like a kind of a hostile tone, but now it's like more apparent. Also, we can examine the prideful attitude of the speaker himself when he lists the different things that can control death. And he continues it on as the lines move on. Line 10 reads, and thus with poison, war, and sickness dwell. And it can be paraphrased into, and poison, war, and sickness control death as well. So this is just a continuation of the last line, and it says keeps on, and the elements of style is that it keeps on listing factors that control death, and it just further mocks death. So now, as we continue in line 11, it states, and poppy or charms can make us sleep as well. And it can be paraphrased into poppy and charms can make us go to sleep too. This is an analogy between poppy and charms and death. Now, when I originally read this, I had no idea what they meant with poppy and charms, but I've read that it's kind of like a substance that can make you go to sleep faster, like a sleeping pill or drug, and expresses that those drugs and substances can make a person fall to sleep faster and more efficiently than death, which just mocks death again. And this keeps on going, as I said earlier. So yeah. Now, as we are approaching the ending of this poem, this is lines 12. And better than thy stroke, why swelt'st thou then? And can be said as, the charms and poppy are more affecting and resting than death. So why is death so prideful then? And we see here an analogy once again, and actually a rhetorical question, which in these lines is trying to direct the reader's attention to the main argument and prepare to wrap up the poem. It's not the end, but it's a step to the end. Now moving on to line 13, it states, one short sleep past, we wake eternally. And it can be said as, after we die, we wake up eternally in the afterlife. This is an allusion to death, to heaven. And this happened once before too, and this is just to resonate with the audience who believe in the afterlife by giving them another religious reason on why death is powerless, and it shows the speaker's point of view on religion, and we see how much it truly matters to the speaker, as this whole argument is based that we go to the afterlife, and that's why we shouldn't be scared of death. Now the last line, and death shall be no more, death thou shalt die. This can be said as and waking up eternally, dying will not be possible. Death, or the idea of death, is what truly dies in the end. And I didn't mention it previously in the lines before, but I did mention it in the annotations. This is an anaphora of the word death, but I think here is where it's most apparent and important, and it stands out to me the most, and it essentially emphasizes the irony of the situation, as you wouldn't expect the thing that causes for people to die is the thing that is dying at the end, which is death. And it basically sums up that anybody can overcome death easily, and there's nothing to fear. And these are the references to the poem. And this is the prompt. I'll read it real quick. In John Donne's poem, Death, Be Not Proud, published in 1633, the speaker is expressing the powerlessness that death has over individuals. Read the poem carefully. Then, in a well-written essay, analyze how Donne uses literary elements and techniques to convey the complexity of death.